Hey, Greg Walsh here. Thank you for tuning in to Yoga Chats. If you like it, why don't you share it? Why don't you comment on it? Why don't you give us a super review? Yogis, thank you for joining Yoga Chats. And today my guest is Susie Murray. And you probably know Susie Murray already. Susie is a very renowned Vinyasa yoga guru from Dublin. Maybe not from Dublin, but based in Dublin. And I'm really excited that Susie, in a couple of weeks' time, you're going to be teaching, very soon, you're going to be teaching in Samadhi, which is a total triumph for us. And it's also a bit of a triumph, a bit of a coup to have you on Yoga Chats today. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm so looking forward to starting in Samadhi on Monday a week.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And there's already people queuing up to get in. So, you know, your fame is, it comes before you. So we know each other. We know each other a long time. We don't know each other a long time in another way. But I've known of Susie Murray for a long time, not least because you're very good. You've got a really good social media presence. You probably don't feel that, but you do. And I've seen so much of your practice because you do post quite a lot, and which I really admire. I struggle with, but I really admire how you do it. You'd probably tell a different story, but tell us a little bit about that, because you are good at that.
So it's funny actually, because I suppose when I first got into social media, I was really quite reluctant. And I still kind of think if I didn't use it for work, I probably wouldn't have Instagram, or I probably wouldn't really use Facebook. I don't really use Facebook as my personal page that much anyway. But once I did start kind of posting a little bit more on Instagram, I just really enjoyed it. I just kind of think it's such a lovely way to kind of play around with photographs and videos and song choices and kind of mix it up a little bit. I'm lucky. I think I'm lucky because I'm Gen X, that I'm not totally hung up on it. That I can, forget about it for a couple of weeks and then, tune back into it. So it's been kind of and I find that it's relatively easy for me to post up a few sequences or videos of my, self practice. So it doesn't take a huge amount out of me, but it's been a great way to kind of connect with other yoga teachers, other studios, and then really with students, so that they can kind of get an idea of what it is I teach when they come to classes. Because I teach Vinyasa, it can really vary between teacher to teacher. So yeah, usually what I'm putting up online is what I'm doing in the studios.
And you don't record your classes, you're recording your own self-practice.
Yeah, and even that is probably a little bit of a push. I don't record classes, but I do. I probably record. No, I don't probably. I do. I record just like little post sequences, post self-practice. So my own self-practice will be quite, personal and intimate, and would not be something I would record very often. But afterwards, then once it's all done, I'll set up the camera and then just record like a little sequence from it that I think might be kind of helpful for people to kind of get inspiration or an idea of what they want to move like too.
I think social media, it's a double-edged sword, but I do think that it is great for allowing people a little bit of insight into perhaps what they're letting themselves in for, or signing up for any yoga class. It does. In a way, previously, you would have just had to come and either ask around, get word of mouth, or just jump in there and try a class. But you can get a little bit of a flavor of what a teacher can offer. So it's really useful like that. And now your practice and your teaching is very much Vinyasa, and you are on the Vinyasa end of Vinyasa, if you know what I mean. Would you agree?
The Vinyasa end? Yeah. My background comes from a little bit of dance. I studied contemporary and ballet in college and had designs on being a dancer. So when I moved into yoga, I started off kind of going into hatha yoga classes and was really enjoying them and really kind of feeling quite powerful in embodying the practice. But then it was the vinyasa that changed everything for me a little bit. And it just began to make so much more sense. It really allowed me to access kind of what I felt to be a little bit more of a poetic outlet or a creative outlet into understanding the practice of yoga. So it was a really easy transition for me to start moving into teaching that. Like when I trained in hatha, and but when I practiced Ashtanga. I really enjoyed the discipline and the strength that came from Ashtanga, but also then the flow element of it. And then I went to India then to do another training, and I signed up for an Ashtanga 200-hour. And I think I was probably there like a week or two when I was like, when are we going to do some Ashtanga? Like, where's the Chaturangas? And I realized then that obviously Ashtanga in India is different to Ashtanga here. I wasn't.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So,
Oh,
this is the Ashtanga 8-limb practice.
8 limbs. Okay.
So I did another training in Hatha, and so I never actually got around to doing a training in Ashtanga, but I was really quite happy then to, dive a little bit more into just the kind of more creative aspect of vinyasa.
And your sequences do look quite creative. Where do you get your inspiration from?
I mean, like so many, new teachers, when you are trying to think about, well, how do I go about sequencing, or how do I start creating my own imprint on this class or this practice, I took a lot of inspiration from Ashtanga and I did that for a long time until I felt really comfortable in just the timing and the pacing and the cueing. And then I became just more comfortable with trying to find out just different directions. All of a sudden, I became really interested in creating as many directions in my practice that I could, and going through all different planes of movement, and trying to articulate my body in different planes. So it just became really experimental, and I'm just kind of building it up from there. So I kind of always try to think of building a practice that's going to be efficient in movement, that's going to create different direction and experiences, and kind of opening your perception all around the mat. And it feels quite thrilling a lot of the times. And I work a lot with repetition as well. So it doesn't always have to be completely new. Like especially in a class situation, like 70% of the class is repetition until everybody feels really comfortable with the directions we're going.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I think now, if I'm commenting, I'm acutely aware that in terms of practice, we're kind of chalk and cheese, and I'm celebrating your chalk and you'd celebrate my cheese, or vice versa. But I do think the power of repetition is really important, because I think just in body terms, there's two aspects. You need to repeat to create change. If you do something once and don't come back to it, it's almost wasted. You do need to repeat things, but also you need to surprise your body. Because if you do the same thing, in like gym terms, this is very much a concept that if you do the same thing the same way all the time, you will plateau and you'll stop making gains. And of course, in yoga, we're not making gains, but we want to feel that the practice is working.
Yeah. And, we talk a lot about what you learn on the mat, can you take it off the mat? And again, that's how my practice evolved to wanting to recreate like spontaneous but complex movement on the mat, because that's how we live our lives, and it's not really controlled when we're off the mat. So being able to kind of react to different transitions, but we do need as well that kind of time to learn it, so you need a little bit of space for the repetitions and for that kind of checking in the alignment and checking in the breath, and then ultimately that will lead you to the vinyasa. Actually, one thing I'll always say in classes is that we talk about this is a vinyasa class, this is a flow class, but you're probably not going to do it until, the last 25 minutes of your practice, that used to really frustrate me when I was trying to kind of work and hone on my skills when I was a vinyasa teacher, because I wanted to be inspired. And I would like be at home and I'd be like, just trying to move really freely. And I would see this on Instagram, another teacher saying how, oh, I just got on my mat this morning and this emerged. And I was like, that doesn't happen for me. I have to really think, well, will I go right? Will I go left? Will I do this or do that? So finally, I kind of started to really embrace the fact that flow doesn't happen, very naturally for a lot of us, that it takes a little bit of prep work and it takes a little bit of forward thinking and putting, certain measurements in place. And then once you've got all those details and once you've got that kind of comfort in knowing your plan, then you can start to really find the ease and the flow and the transition. And that's when it becomes really magical.
Yeah, what's the expression? It's a certain, is it, let's say 90%, 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. You have to do the work. Maybe some people are very creative and, creative flows come to them. But I do also think as a yoga teacher, when you're leading people through something, like I've been to classes and it's a long time now, and someone has said, I saw this on YouTube today and we're going to try it. I'm like, I don't want to try it. I want to try something that you've done 100 times and you can back it up.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I'm guilty of going, why don't we give this a go?
Yeah, but I like, if I was in your class and you said that, I would trust that you had already given it enough of a go that because it's not just about being able to talk someone through it. It's being able to deal with it when it goes wrong, or when they have, differing physiology or, differing abilities or whatever. It's the depth of it that really you need to bring, I think, as an experienced yoga teacher, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because people get themselves into knots, and as well, the flow part does attract me to the vinyasa practice and the creativity of it all, but also I'm a sucker for the specifics and the detail, and I love to create a sense of ease in people's movement by saying, I want you to move your heel just like a centimeter, or, you're going to take a little bend in the elbow, or you're going to connect the arm into your shoulder socket. And it's all those tiny little, building blocks that will create that ease then in your movement. It has to be easeful. It has to be a nice balance between effort and ease.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think about it.
Yeah, no, I'm getting excited talking to you about it. I remember I have a teacher in the UK, wonderful teacher, Margaret, and she, so many times I've gone to workshops with her, and she'll do this pose, and then she'll do that pose, and then she'll do that pose, and then she'll do this. And it's like, I have no idea what she's doing. And then suddenly at the end, it all comes together into, it could be a sequence, or it could be one pose that absorbs all of these different aspects. Because of course, that's the beauty of yoga. When you really start to, scratch below the surface, you notice the similarities in poses and the difference in poses, and the similarities in quite disparate poses sometimes, that you can take a certain aspect of Ardha Chandrasana and you can bring it into Supta Padangusthasana too, or whatever. And I love seeing that, whether it's flowing or whether it's static. I love seeing that creativity. And I'm thinking of your classes, because I'm a stickler, but I think I'm a bit of a playful, slightly jokery stickler. And I do love, taking ages, and it could be a 90-minute class, and an hour into it saying, okay, we're nearly warmed up, we can nearly start now. And I know half of people are relieved and amused, and half of people are going, oh, I am so sick of his ways. But it kind of works, because I do take a little bit of that Margaret approach of, pulling things together, and then there's in a way, a final reveal,
Yeah. I did the same, actually. There's I will regularly like teach a sequence and we'll break it down. We go section over section, then we'll repeat it again. Then we'll put another kind of slant on it by this time it's all alignment, the next time it's all pace, and this time it's all breath. And then like people are working hard and the heat is kind of up in their bodies, and then saying, and this time we're going to do it right. I just like saying that just to kind of break that little energy a little bit, but to kind of realize I'm not actually that anal.
No, I know. But that to me very much sounds like your dance approach as well. Because I've observed dance classes, and they will build segments and build blocks, and then put the blocks together into parts, and then put it together as a whole.
Yeah.
In dance, it's a performance, but in yoga, it's something else.
And that's the funny thing. Like, I think it wasn't until I started practicing yoga that I realized it was never the performance part of the dance that I was interested in. You know, I never wanted to be the prima ballerina or at the front row. I was just like happy if I was down the back, you know. So it has that kind of similarities, but there was never but you know, like I think probably for many dancers, it's not the performance, it's the experience, you know, it's the connection to the movement and the sensations and the breath.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's actually the dance. It's the movement. You mentioned something earlier I'm curious about. You said about taking yoga off the mat. Where are you at with that? What do you mean?
I think, you know, the lines become quite, you know, blurred when you're like, you know, practicing yoga on the mat, and you suddenly start to think of how those lessons that you're learning on the mat, how you can apply them then into just your day-to-day life, how you can apply them into your interactions with the people around you. You know, and again, whether it's just that tuning into the breath or listening and feeling into your body, and not like always feeling that you need to like label everything as good or bad, but just identifying with how it makes you feel rather than feelings, but the sensations. And so then just kind of connecting that into your experience outside of the yoga studio, outside of your practice.
Is there a little bit of a philosopher in Susie Murray there?
I don't know. I think there is in everybody, isn't there?
Yeah, there is in everybody. You're so right. And do you find that, have you taken yoga off the mat? How has it helped you? Can you say?
I think probably, well, you see, like a lot of people who come to practicing, you know, yoga or even going down the kind of teacher training route, they're generally all seekers, you know. They're always kind of like looking for a connection or an understanding. And I think I probably always was a little bit reflective and introspective before I went down that road anyway, but it's definitely given me a little bit more of a maybe like an inside confidence, you know, and maybe a bit more able to not get so affected by everything that's around me.
Well, that has great value, doesn't it? Jeez.
It's a bit of a superpower, all right, that you can.
It's a total superpower. Yeah. I think for me, I feel that my yoga practice has given me a sense of comfort in my body, a sense of ease. I mean, a sense of a reduction in general aches and pains. But I think the more powerful part really has been the mental emotional effects, and for me, massively being able to access my breath to regulate, I find is really powerful. And that was only, honestly, like 25 years of yoga or whatever, and it was about 4-5 years ago that really started to gel for me. Previous to that, it was much more body physical based, and I felt that I kind of dropped into a lower level with it in a good way. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think as well for me, it was a slow kind of unfolding, like a slow kind of untangling of realizing that, you know, my body was more than just that kind of physical connection I have with it. And I always pretty much felt comfortable in movement in my body, but being able to feel that it's like it's a home that you can kind of return to and, get recharged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And do you, what's your practice? Can I ask you? That's a really personal question. And I don't like people asking me, so you can tell me to.
That's okay. No, my practice is quite slow, like really slow. It's like begins with a lot of attention to the breath and ends with a lot of attention to the breath, so that it really feels like a love song. And it's quite simple, but unbelievably slow. Much slower than I would ever teach.
Yeah. Couldn't be as slow as mine.
Really? You're stationary?
Well, no, not quite, but it happens. But yeah, very slow. 5-minute dogs and that kind of thing. But I feel that our approaches, I think our goals are probably not unsimilar at all, but our approaches are quite different. But that's the beauty of yoga. You can take different paths.
Yeah.
All the spokes lead to the center, but they're all different, but they all lead to the center. And I would be probably a little less movement based, and I think I do. My breath instigates movement, but in a much smaller way, perhaps. Like I go into a pose and then observe the breath and observe the effect it has on my posture. And I just hold for ages. I'm quite static and I'm quite sort of analytical in my practice. Not to say it doesn't have poetry, maybe not as much as yours, but I love that your practice is like a love song. That really is such a beautiful way to view it.
Well, because I realized, very early on that I just didn't want to do it if I didn't want to do it, So I always want to feel, and that's not to say that I wake up every morning, I'm like, get me onto the mat. But I kind of realized that I only want to, I only want to move in a way that I love, and a way that makes me feel love. So, and I realize as well that there's a lot of wisdom and benefit in identifying the areas that you are reluctant to go into and kind of examining them a little bit. But to get me onto the mat, I'm going to just, start with the things that I love and move from there. And then usually it becomes like a timeless experience, especially because there a lot of repetition and stuff. It doesn't really matter if you've done something once or twice or 10 times, but it's just just a nice little timeless experience.
When you get into repetition, I think though it's never the same.
No,
that's it. Like I know I've in India, 25 back bends, and every one of them, once you sort of, the first 10 are like, the first 5 are fine, second 5 are starting to get fatigue. And then something has to give.
Yeah.
And it kind of has to be that ego of this, because suddenly a narrative starts of, why are they doing this to me? This is rubbish. I could be, I could be drinking coconut out the front. I could be doing anything. Why am I even here? And then once you let go of that, you start to notice and just settle into it. Every time you come back to the same pose, it's a different pose. You come at it. Maybe you switch on in different ways, or maybe just your mind has changed, or maybe because you've done another pose in between, your breath has opened up further, so your breath space has shifted. So repetition is actually, it's really good.
Yeah, it's a new experience every time.
Yeah, it is. And I used to worry when I was planning classes that people would be bored doing the warrior poses and the Trikonasanas and all, until I remembered I got on my own mat and got into Trikonasana and kind of went, Trikonasana, warrior 2. Well, mind you, warrior 2, 30 seconds of warrior 2, and then it starts to go warrior 2. But but there's a lovely joy and reassurance in coming back to, people talk about coming back to your mat, coming back to after a pandemic, coming back to our mat and all, but coming back to the practices that we know and feel safe in.
Yeah.
But then you touched on then bringing in a little bit of the stuff we don't like as well, maybe bringing a little bit of darkness into it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because I remember when I was doing Ashtanga and I was in Auckland and I went to a Mysore practice and I tried to skip over a few poses and this, the teacher coming over to me and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I just don't like that one." So she was having none of it, and she insisted I go back into it. And there is a total beauty in that because you go back into it and you're like, well, what is you start going, what's my problem here? Is this pain or is this discomfort? And then you realize it's not pain. I'm not like, I'm not doing myself harm. There's, maybe a little quality of discomfort here, all right. And, then you start kind of digging and, uncovering a little bit more information and a little bit more wisdom. And that's often a great place to kind of grow from, and I think that initial, recognition of what your resistance is. Why are you resisting? Why, and for me as well, it's back bends. I used to hate back bends. The heat, I would be like sweating in them, going, "What is going on here?"
And what was going on there?
Do you know, it was just a really quick reaction. Before I'd even allow myself to feel it, I'd be like, "I hate back bends. Oh my God, no, I'm too hot. I have to get out of this." And then when I switched it, I was like, okay, so stop, thinking you hate them because you're getting hot. Like, what is this heat? And it's just warm. That's not bad. There's no pain. And just kind of uncovering that and kind of staying with it really opened up a different mindset to the practice and to the poses and to, how I react to things as well,
Yeah.
I don't like it. I'm out of here. So that was quite good. And I kind of I feel like there's so much for me to kind of pick up and learn now from those sensations rather than labeling them good or bad.
Yeah, I hear you. I'd be the opposite to you, forward bends.
Oh,
Stiff
really?
hamstrings, cycling around, and
yeah.
And then ignoring the poses that are good for them. So I had, it's a long time ago now, but I sort of had a moment where I just thought, I'm just going to kind of look into this black hole. I'm going to go into the pose and not overdo it, but just go into it and feel what's going on and why am I having this reaction? Because the reaction was much bigger than the pose. And the funny thing was, once I started to just sit in the pose and go, okay, so I'm feeling certain sensations, but they're causing triggers in me. Why is that? And just kind of asking myself the questions. Then I found that the pose started to lose its malice, and I started to find, okay, I'm feeling a challenge here, but it's a good challenge. And it took a process, it took a time, but I did manage to turn it around. That I got to a point that I could enjoy them.
Yeah.
And they're never my best pose, but I don't care anymore. Whereas they were a thing for me. So I can relate. Absolutely. Yeah. The practice, it brings up things over the years, doesn't it? Have you had any injuries over the years through practice?
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you say about your forward folds because, and it's probably pretty typical of Vinyasa, is that I tend to overstretch my hamstrings. So, I mean, and actually, it's not that bad. It's only that little hamstring sit bone point. There's a little burn. And I know it's just from years of favoring forward folds and avoiding back bends, so I'm all that now. I'm like, give me back bends, I love them. But I think sequencing is something that I am really passionate about in Vinyasa, and in trainings I kind of harp on about it a lot because there's such an imbalance in our sequencing. There's so much shoulder flexion, there's so much hip flexion, there's a lot of emphasis on those forward folds and not so much on strengthening the back body. So I'm really on a mission to kind of retrain that because I have felt that like ping in the hamstrings. So it's not there's no pop, thank God. But yeah, I'm kind of talking about it endlessly to my trainees.
And And do you, in terms of strengthening your back, are you using yoga to do that, or do you use outside work?
I'm actually just using yoga, really. Yeah.
It's all there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It depends on like how you think about it. I mean, so lots of prone back bends, and then including even warrior three, like hamstring curls, all that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good stuff.
Dirty work.
Yeah.
But I get you. I think the problem, because yoga does pop up injuries sometimes. Well, everything does. I mean, you get injured getting out of your bed. You get injured. Like, there are way more injuries through playing golf than through practicing yoga.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of our sequencing, we do favor forward bends. We favor going forward, not so much going back. And I think if we shift the sequencing, we can address that imbalance.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Like you, I had age-related narrowing of a nerve canal a few years ago. I had to have back surgery to open it back up. It was, started the pandemic, I could hardly walk. It was a bad situation. And I didn't really want to have the surgery, but I was told, look, this is what you need to do in this case. It's not like you've just a bulging disc that you can take pressure off.
Yeah. And I think like a lot of times people see yoga as like therapeutic, and it 100% can be, but it's also a lot of what we teach and a lot of what we practice is the asana part, and it's a really strong skill and one not to be taken lightly, you know. So I think when we talk about yoga injuries and like, oh, yoga hurt my back or yoga hurt my hips, it's like that's something you just have to be mindful about and you have to pay attention to. And that's why I think alignment is so important.
I'm your neighbor. My alignment focus has, but just to finish what I was going to say, prone back bends were an absolute lifesaver to refire and re-strengthen areas that, you know, when you have surgery, everything atrophies. But yeah, I think my alignment focus, when I learned alignment first through, you know, years of Iyengar, was very much about this is the correct way to do it. Yeah. Whereas now I find it more interesting to use it as a sort of as a study tool. If I do that, what does that do?
Yeah.
I kind of map out my body in that way and map out, I guess, students' bodies in that way. And that's kind of my buzz. I really get a kick out of it. And like that, you can take a pose, and if you turn, you know, the angle of the thigh, you can have an effect on a different group of muscles. Mm-hmm. So you can use poses so skillfully to just to open you up, to strengthen you up, to support you, to, you know, to help work through injury or whatever. It's a huge subject, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting. And I think alignment again can get that little bit of you know, dirty look, because it's people kind of associate it with like the right way to do something or the wrong way to do something, and it's not. Obviously it depends on skeletal variation and the practitioner and, you know, the different what you're looking to attain out of the position. But I think it's really, really interesting, as you said, to kind of check in to see, well, if I place my foot this way, how does that feel? If I change it, how does that feel? You know, and it really opens up the space for people to participate in the practice, you know, find different alignment positions for them to get different experiences out of it.
Yeah, you can gain a different result from the same pose through changing the alignment. I agree with you. I think people are down on alignment. To be honest, I feel they're missing the point of it, because it's not, there was a time where it was, this is the right way to do it, but we've moved beyond that. Though I do also, you might disagree with me, I think people do over rely sometimes on skeletal variation, because we're mostly relatively similar. I appreciate the head of the thigh bone might go in at a different angle, or we might have a deeper hip socket or a more shallow hip socket, and that's going to affect stuff like Padmasana. But in terms of maybe straightening your legs, I think we can straighten our legs.
Yeah, no, I do. I agree with you on that, totally.
All right, we're not going to come to blows on that just yet. Susie, I'm going to wrap it up now because I don't want to take any more of your time. But I'd say people would probably listen for longer because it's been a really super yoga chat having this conversation.
Oh, thanks a million for having me on. It's been awesome.
It's been awesome. I think we should do it again. We should see what people enjoy and
we'll do next week.
Yeah, and they can vote. They can say, we'd like you to talk about, and we can bring that in.
Cool.
So, but for today, thank you so much. And we'll chat again soon.
Thanks a million.